And, of course, time now to focus on the latest developments across the continent. This is Africa in View. Right, in this part of the show, we give you a view of what is happening across the continent. The launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour in Africa in March 2021 was followed by Child Protection Week in South Africa this month. According to the International Labour Organization, Africa has the largest number of child labourers in the world. 72.1 million African children are estimated to be in child labour and 31.5 million in hazardous work. Now that the situation has worsened due to the pandemic, how can individuals contribute to the elimination of child labour in their communities? To give us more depth and understanding, we are joined by child rights activist and author Stacey. Stacey, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. You are one person who's passionate about literacy, safety and the security of children. The numbers are quite frightening. One in every 3 victims of trafficking is a child, and that's globally a very concerning matter. Exactly how big is this network?
It's actually unimaginably big, and it's more than numbers. It's these actual children going to work. As we are speaking right now, they wake up at the dawn of day, they walk and work long, treacherous hours, and these numbers, these figures that you are speaking out to the viewers this morning, many of us might just look over it, but this is actual cases and actual children that we aren't seeing through the lens of how harsh the reality is.
The impact of COVID-19 has essentially exacerbated the situation with the numerous lockdowns and, of course, the school closures and increased poverty because of the pandemic. Let's then talk about what exactly this has entailed and how much of an impact it's had on child labour.
Yes, like you mentioned, poverty. Poverty is the biggest factor and the reason why children are laboring. Many of the times these children are going as breadwinners for their own family because a breadwinner has passed away or they're not making enough money to sustain the current family. So a lot of the time poverty plays a big role as to why children are going out and they're working, whether the children are going on their own will or on their own accord, or it's the parents forcing them to go into this work. And a lot of the time it's been so normalized within their community that these children wouldn't actually want to stop and actually want to seek an education for themselves because they think, and they've been brought up in this way where they think child laboring or them going to work and providing for their siblings and their family is the only way that they're going to survive in this world. So it's not just us tackling the issue of these children just going to work, but also tackling the communities and just how they've been brought up within their societies.
Human trafficking is also another serious matter that is very close to this matter. Let's then break down the characteristics and the profile of a child victim of trafficking.
So usually you would see that these children, of course, when you are trafficked, you are taken away from your home area, your environment against your will. And they're taken to this unknown place. Their parents or their family are unaware of where they are. But also in some cases, you'd see that these parents have sold their children to these traffickers for, a little bit of money to sustain themselves here and there. Often it depends on the type of work these children are put through. Girls are mostly put into sex trafficking work or domestic work where they are forced to do these treacherous things, and the boys are usually put into hazardous and hard labor. Many of the times these children are not getting paid, they are not getting reparations, and many of these times these children do not find their ways back home. They either die during the course of their work or they just grow into adults not remembering or not knowing that they came from a loving home environment. So those are some of the characteristics of a child that's been trafficked.
Over 9% of African children are involved in some form or the other of hazardous work. I mean, you've mentioned a few examples, but looking at the details, what does hazardous work essentially mean?
So hazardous work, means that you are putting your life in danger, you are putting your health in danger, and you're putting your childhood at risk. So a lot of the time, these child laborers do not get to experience the joy of childhood. They don't get to play. They don't get to have close friends or close family connections. They're just spent working, and they're in environments with harmful fuels and harmful fumes that will affect their health, affect their growth, and most of the time their mental well-being as well. So when we're talking about hazardous work, most of the time it's physical and it's mental.
Let's then talk about the cheap labor for farmers and how children are used to slave away at those farms. As you mentioned, some aspects that are often not paid for the work that they do, should they have been trafficked. Now, the characteristics of the cheap labor for farmers, I mean, we know of stories, for instance, in Ivory Coast, where young children, miners, are used to work in the coffee and cocoa plantations. What does this now mean for the consumer, and how then can the consumer add their voice to ensure that they're more aware of where their food comes from, in a way to ensure that there's some sort of social awareness around matters like this?
I think there's a lot that an individual can do, despite thinking that, okay, I'm just one person facing a multitude or millions of cases of child trafficking and child laboring. But as an individual, you can obviously check with the brands that you buy. Check that they are safe, that they are friendly, that they are not using unpaid for labor, whether it's in children or adults, because adults are facing injustices within the workforce as well. So as an individual, you can check the products that you are buying, do your research, and make sure that these products are safe towards the environment as well. And you can also spread the awareness by seeing that if you're going to a friend's house, they have this particular product, maybe just, hint at it towards their here and there. You can also teach your children about it, because the children are the next generation. They are the upcoming generation. There are social media platforms that you can use to spread awareness as well. And if you see that there is a brand, and that you found out there's a brand that is using unpaid for labor, you can speak out about it. You can sort of form your own awareness. I myself, as an individual, I'm small, but I've managed to build a community where I'm able to raise awareness and get people to listen to me, so you can too.
A lot more children with COVID-19 and the lockdowns, a lot more children are accessing the internet, perhaps unsupervised, and a lot more younger children are online. And of course, there lies a danger in that when it comes to the hunting ground for traffickers. What can parents do to ensure some form of safety online? Because that is also a very dangerous space.
Yes, the online space, although it's very helpful within these times of COVID, giving us platforms to speak our ideas, is also extremely, extremely dangerous. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of young children now coming and using the internet. So to parents, I would like to say, don't leave your children, or don't give your children unsupervised internet. I know on these Android and iPhone devices, there is a way to block many sites and block social media apps. If your child is not of age, I don't think they should be using social media apps, even though they seem harmless, like TikTok and Instagram and all these. The only sort of social media they can have is maybe a video streaming app for children, and games for children, and maybe some form of communication between you and the child, not outside communication. And if they do have, you should just monitor and supervise that. Make sure that if they are going out, you know exactly where they are going, and you are supervising that for your children. So just be careful. Don't let your children on unsupervised, and don't let them go unsupervised.
Stacey, the vulnerabilities of the boy and girl child online, or whether they are really being watched by traffickers, how do they vary as we look at the two genders?
Yes, of course, in young girls who are more exposed to things other older girls might be doing. So you see a lot of older girls showing their body. Young girls might also look at that as the normal way they're going to portray themselves on social media. So now you see young girls flaunting and showing their bodies more on social media, which makes them more vulnerable to these types of people who are looking for vulnerable children to take in and to obviously traffic. So young girls are more at risk when it comes to themselves on social media. But of course, we're not going to disregard boys, because now I'm not going to say, okay, one's more. But of course, young girls are more vulnerable than boys.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. A phenomenal child rights activist and author, Stacey, giving us some insight, weighing in on the very important aspect and issue of child labor across the continent.